As you all know, this episode is going to cover, well, first of all, the question I have is, did everyone get an opportunity to look at the this or that I posted? Yes. Okay. How about you, Cara? Were you able to see that? If not, well, I can't do it from here. I had to switch computers. So we're going to discuss what that was to do is to trigger some things that you need to consider when it comes to planning for life after death. Life after a death could be your death or anyone else's death, but these are things that we really need to be considerate of. And so I also have some other ones that are forthcoming. Um, so I will say, so we have this or that. The first option is life insurance or GoFundMe. Now, you can make a comment in the comment section since we have to have everyone muted. But I would appreciate if you would just make a comment. Is there a section here for you to make a comment? Okay. Comments and are from viewers on Facebook Live. Not all room participants may be able to see them. Okay. So if you have the option to make a comment, the first question is life insurance or GoFundMe. Now, the reason why I put those first is because if you've been on this earth for any period of time, you have been exposed to people doing a GoFundMe when their loved ones pass away. That is the worst time to try to plan to pay for something. So we need to start conditioning our minds to get life insurance. And the wonderful thing is that there are policies that are affordable. If you would please put yourself on mute when you enter the room. There are policies that are affordable for funeral planning only. Jessie is aware of those, and if you'd like Jessie to share that, and then in a few minutes, well, just give me some dialogue on your experience with that. I know that we have started a policy for ourselves. They had like two different options. They had options that covered just a cremation, and then they had options that covered a full-on funeral. So we were able to select what choices we wanted. Like if we wanted the obituary, flowers, all of that stuff was actually included in it. And they give you up to $15,000. And so if you don't use all $15,000, the family could get the remaining amount, but they will allow you to maximize it so that your family could have some extra money to work with. Is that one that you're familiar with, Jessie? Uh, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I had to double hit the unmute button. Yeah, so the policy that I'm aware of is also, most life insurance policies, when you activate them, you have to have the death certificate. Well, you usually don't get that until like weeks to a month
Correct.
later, and by then you usually want to have the funeral. So it's one of the best ways to cover all of those expenses right up front.
And they don't cost a lot of money. So it's not like you're getting $100,000 policy and they're examining your health and all of that. It doesn't work that way.
No.
So definitely, that is something to look into. One thing that I would like to caution people on is if you get it through a specific funeral home, one question you definitely need to ask is if it is only tied to that funeral home or if you can use it anywhere. Because there are some, funeral homes that will offer it, but it's only good for them. And you don't want to be in a situation where if that funeral home closes down or something like that, you don't have, you can't use that policy and get the things that you've requested. So that's insurance or GoFundMe was the first option on the, and I wish there was a way I could share it, but again, I'm on my computer and I don't have that. So the next one is.
Were you trying to share your screen?
Well, if I had the actual this or that saved on this computer, I could share the screen and show it, but it's not saved on this laptop, unfortunately. So the next one is going to be veteran or civilian, right? So the funeral planning for a veteran is different than it is for a civilian. There are some things that are available to veterans that are not available to your average civilian, like your flag, your where you get buried, and things of that nature. So that is something to consider. Will versus intestate is the next one. Jessie's very familiar with that, so I'm going to let her discuss that some more in a little bit. DNR, which is do not resuscitate and or keep me alive. That is a choice that your family members have to make if there's a situation where you are put on life support, and they have to choose whether or not to resuscitate you if you flatline. And so you don't want to leave that in, if you really care about your family, you don't want to leave that up to them. I've had, me and my ex-husband, we had to make that decision for his grandmother. It was not a fun decision to make. I wouldn't put that on anybody, because you're already emotionally, tied into this person being sick or whatever's going on with them. And now you have to decide whether or not to pull the plug. So that's where a living will come into play. And there's also a, what is the other thing that I have?
Advanced directive.
Advanced directive. So you need to have an advanced directive, and you can pretty much get that for free online. So I would encourage you to have an advanced directive and leave that with, the responsible person. I have designated a name for the responsible people. Those are PALs. They are planning administrative liaisons. So that's going to be another area you need to look at. Or if you flatline and you want to stay alive, you want them to try again to resuscitate you, that needs to be outlined in that advanced directive. And which is the next one, advanced directive or I don't care. So if you don't have an advanced directive, then you're basically saying you don't care what happens to you, and you don't have a choice. If you're, in a coma, your loved one can do whatever you want. I personally have an advanced directive because I know my husband loves me and I love him. And I don't know that he won't keep me in a vegetative state. I don't want to be in a vegetative state. Like if I was alive to say something, I would say, no, don't resuscitate me. Just take me off of the breathing machines and everything and let me go. So that's, I do care about that. And so I have an advanced directive. And I believe that is it for this or that. At least that's all that's showing on my screen here. All right. So I don't see any comments on the screen. So I'm assuming you can't make comments. Can anyone make comments?
I'm not sure. This is the first time I've participated in a live like this where a room is created. Normally it's just like you just go on a Facebook page and you click go live. And
but you can see it still live, right now.
Well, the way I got into this was I clicked on a link to participate, but I mean I don't know. Oh, I guess Uncle Darian just responded. So maybe the comments are from people who see the live and maybe
Right,
not.
so they can see live. Okay, so hi. Okay, Darian, I see you. I see your comment. So I have my phone here and I'm actually here as well. So awesome. I'm glad to see that you can see the live. See me. Right, so they can. Ah, okay. I'm going to.
Robert, you might want to. Okay, he muted himself.
All right. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you my high school friend, Jessie Sorensen-Egan. When I started off the plan the course process, she did reach out to me. She had some questions. We had a very awesome conversation, but Jessie has had some life experiences that I have asked her to share with everyone tonight because and she's not the only person I've heard this from, but I would like for her to share everything that she's been dealing with for, it has been the last 10 years, right?
A little bit longer, but
okay.
As the PAL for the 4 different estates, yes, it's been about 11 years now.
About 11 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So that being said, Jessie's had a lot of experience in this realm of, you know, not having plans in place and what that looks like for the person who's left behind. So the floor is yours, Jessie. Thank you for coming tonight.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure to be here. You know, one of the things that, you know, death isn't easy to talk about, and that's why a lot of people don't plan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so, you know, a lot of people don't plan or, you know, just like you said, you love your husband. So you think, hey, my husband will take care of it if I go. And he thinks you'll do exactly what he wanted when he goes, you know, and people just believe that there's this fairy tale that things are going to work out the way that they wanted in the end. And then there's the business side of it. You know, there's business in death, and there's so much that you have to do just to be able to have a funeral, to plan a funeral, to put it all together, to, you know how many, when you're planning the funeral, death certificates that you might need, because everybody wants an original copy. Nobody wants a photocopy of the original copy. They want the original copy with the pressed seal in it. So, you know, the last 10 years, I inherited, so my mother passed away in 2010. 2 years later, my aunt passed away, and she was the one in charge of my grandparents' estate that she hadn't finished the administration with, that had died 10 and 15 years previously. So I was left with a lot of work to do, and I'm still doing it, you know. And so the biggest draw for me to Radia's program and her plan is that I'm so busy doing that other stuff and living my life that I haven't done this properly for myself and for my family. And I realize, hey, that's not right. That's not the loving, caring thing to do. So I'm here to learn as much and also just share, you know, the knowledge that I have. Just every little bit of planning that you can do, you know, knowing whether or not you want a trust or an estate, you know, knowing the value of your assets, having an inventory, you know, knowing if your grandchild might want Nana's sweater. You know, you'd think that that would be an easy decision to make, but sometimes when people pass away, even those little tiny decisions become an argument or a fight, and it can tear families apart. So the more plan that you have, the better off you are, and the better off your family will be, because they can just grieve and go through that process. I can't hear you now.
So yes, that's one of several reasons why I'm compelled to create I was compelled to create Plan the Course. So when you're talking about death certificates, right, and them needing the original copy, like that seems like something that's so minute, like, but when you're in the middle of it, there's so many different things that you have to close out that, you know, it's mind-boggling. And like you said, you need to have at least 10 to 15 copies of the death certificate. And, you know, just to get, you know, some of the preliminary things out of the way. I mean, you can't even get access to that life insurance policy until you have that death certificate. You can't do anything with bank accounts without the death certificate. But it's not just the death certificate. If you're married, you have to have the marriage license on hand, you know, a certified copy of that. If things are going to be changed into your name, and then that's a whole other you know, subject, depending on what it is that you need to get transferred into your name. And if the entity that has control of that asset is going to allow you to change things into your name. And, you know, wills, when you talked about trust as well, like I believe trust to me is the better option than a will. But if you're going to I would rather someone have a will than not have anything at all. So if you don't understand trust or anything, that's fine. I'm pretty well versed in those. But if you don't understand a trust and you don't want to be bothered with a trust, fine. But leave a will at least, because if there's nothing there, then all of this stuff becomes the property of the state. And it goes to the state, and then it's in probate, and that's called intestate, because no one has really left any instructions. And so the house, the car, the bank accounts, the everything that that person had control over and didn't leave instructions for, well, the state says that belongs to me, or I'm going to hold this until someone can prove that they are entitled to that. And then on the backside of it, once you prove that you're entitled to it, now you're going to get taxed to death. Like they're going to do estate taxes. And I mean, states have their own taxes. You got federal taxes and all of that stuff. So I think in some instances, people don't do that because they know that their loved ones are going to be maybe taxed to death. I don't know, but I really can't say, you know, what's in people's minds. But I do know that more often than not, there's no plan in place. And it's the illusion that I'm going to live forever, or I don't have time to think about it. And that's just not realistic. And it's not fair to the person that is left holding the bag. I see a comment that said Jessie made a great comment about how families are torn apart because the person that died didn't plan. I've seen that as well. I've experienced that as well. With my own father, I talked to him about this because, of course, I'm really inundated in it and wanted to have a plan in place. But there was a presumption that once a person gets older, it's like, are you waiting for me to die? I mean, those are the kind of comments like, you're waiting for me to die. So I'm not going to give you any information. I'm not going to give you my social security number. I'm not going to give you my address. I'm not going to let you do an insurance policy on me. And, you know, but my dad loved me, but it was just kind of like this taboo thing for him to talk to me about that type of stuff, when there were other siblings and other family members who felt that they should be entitled to those types of things. So my goal was not to become rich when he died, but to have at least some money, like 10,000, like a small policy, where when he passed away, his funeral would be covered, you know? So there's just,
I'm going to piggyback on what Radia said there. And, you know, even if you're married and you have a joint bank account, if your spouse passes away, the bank can hold your funds until they receive that death certificate. So just even, you know, planning a simple thing like having enough cash on hand to last 2 weeks to be able to get through that waiting period, because even if both of your names are, now there's a lot of banks now though that you can go into the bank and set up the plan with the bank so that that doesn't happen, but a lot of people don't even know that that's something that's offered.
Because they're not thinking about it.
They're not thinking about it, but then, you know, you got to pay your bills, you got to do all that, but you can't even, you know, get a coffee when you're grieving, and you can't do it. Or like what you said about your father, you know, he didn't want to talk about it. My grandfather didn't mind talking about it, but he told one child one thing and another grandchild another thing. You know, he had Parkinson's, so he didn't remember who he told what, and he didn't share that with his wife. And in his will, everything went to his wife. So then the decision was hers, and she made the decisions that she wanted, not necessarily what he said. And he may have even double promised things, and then people are hurt, and then that's where those fighting starts and the family starts to fall apart.
Yeah, absolutely. So you know, and then there's the situation of, you know, what I want to make poignantly clear is that you can think you're doing the right thing by having insurance policies. I love my family. You know, people say, I love my family. I have insurance. Like, I've had conversations. I'm like, okay, do you have insurance? Yeah, I have insurance. I'm good. No, you're not good, because if your family doesn't have the information they need in order to initiate the claim on that insurance policy, it's not like the insurance company is tracking whether or not you die. Like, I've looked into that. There's no central database that all of these states are communicating. There's nothing centralized to where you could type in, like, if, you know, if someone goes missing or whatever, and you're trying to find out, are they dead or alive? There's no centralized database that holds all of that. You have to go state by state. In some cases, county by county, it differs. So finding out if someone is alive or dead, it's like a needle in a haystack, you know? So unless you're there when they pass away, or you have some contact, and just think of all the people who are just like by themselves, you know, like there's no contact with them, especially older folks. There's no contact with them. Maybe their family fell out or something like that, and they're by themselves. And then they pass away. No one knows where anything is at, you know, and then there's that, you know, situation where, okay, they don't know if there's any insurance policies in place. They don't, you know, so there is a way that you can search for an insurance policy, but the only way you would know to search for the insurance policy is years and years later, where you look that person's name up on, like, maybe unclaimed cash or something like that, and they'll tell you, you know, by that state. But it's on, that's by, like, there's a central database for that, that you can, you know, it's broken down and it'll lead you to a state. You look the name up and it'll lead you to a state. But there's still the process that you have to go through for that. So even after that person's been gone for years, there still could be some things that are floating around out there. Thank you for posting that. There's still some things that are floating around out there that, you know, the insurance company will do, I guess, a quality assurance check of, hey, I haven't heard from this person. This person stopped paying the policy. And that's another thing. Like, so there's just so many different variables that we just, I mean, unless you're like me and you want to know that stuff, you won't know it, and no one will tell it to you. The funeral home, their job is to just guide you through the burial process, right? They're not there to give you advice on how to close out an estate, or how to, you know, how to close out a bank account, or they're not there for that. Like, they're really not. And some people don't even know to even ask for the death certificate, you know, and they don't want to see the death certificate, not knowing how important it is for you to have it. So you know, this.
Or I'll add to Radia's that, that you can shop your funeral homes so that you know that there's different prices. When my mother passed away, I called 2 different funeral homes, and one for cremation was $800 and the other one was $3,000. It was the same box. They're still going to put them with the same flames. So if cremation is your plan, even shopping around, you don't think of that when someone's dead to call more than one place. But when you get told $3,000 up front, you're like, oh, well, maybe I should. But sometimes you don't have that clarity. Right. You're just too deep in your grief. And, it's easy to be taken advantage of, and not every funeral home is really there to help you. They're there to make money, because that's the business.
Paid salesmen, they get commission just like anyone else does. So, it's really important to, start thinking about those things and jotting it down somewhere, even if it's on like a piece of paper, that you put in a safe deposit box and say, hey, if something happens to me, here's the key to the safe deposit box, but there's tons of things. So I have decided that I'm going to release the public side of Plan the Course, and I'm planning on having that completed this week. So on there, you'll be able to, there's just a ton of information on there, and any question you have, if it's not answered in that website, then there's a way that people can get in contact with me, so that I can just point them in the right direction. It is not going to cost anything for that, but I will take donations. So that's just kind of where I'm at with it, because I am going to be utilizing my time for that. I don't mind helping, though. I don't mind helping because it's just, this particular subject. I mean, everyone, it's like death is a part of life. So everyone's going to have to deal with it. So there's not even a thing that I can say, well, this is just for this specific demographic of people. It's not like that, and everyone's situation is different. And I just really want to encourage everyone to, just think about that. And it doesn't matter your age. Like age doesn't matter.
And even if you're single and you don't have kids, my aunt was single. She didn't have kids. And, she had a will that was over a decade old when she passed away. And she had written notes on her will in pencil of changes that she wanted made. And she procrastinated that. And we had to go to court. And she lived in Canada, so it was another country. So we had to go to court and say, hey, this is what her original intention was, or, this was her current intention, with no way to prove it. And then that's a whole nother messy business. So even if you're not married or you don't have kids of your own, if you want your niece to get that, your nephew to get that, you have to be clear about what your intentions are and keep it updated. Because the situation today is not even going to be your situation 2 years, 5 years. Set yourself a schedule to refresh.
And right now, I know of someone right now who is in that situation where it was written when this person was married and they got divorced and had, children with a new wife, right? But they passed away suddenly from a heart attack, and now the ex-wife has everything, and she gets to decide who gets what. And depending on the relationship between them, I believe she was telling me that fortunately in this situation, the relationship was good, but that's not the only time I've heard of that happening. And the other kid, everybody misses out. Everybody misses out. So it's important to even, review that every, every 3 months, every quarter, every, 3 months and a quarter is the same, but every, at least once a year. And again, that's where Plan a Course comes in, because we do send reminders for people to come back and take a look at, what it is that they have put in there, and if they need to make any changes. Because life goes on. I mean, it doesn't stop. Like, the maintenance of it does not stop just because it's done now. You're thinking about it now and it's complete now. But the longer you live, you still need to revisit that to make sure that your intentions are met.
Hey, Radia.
Yes.
Hey, I just wanted to touch on something, and I posted an article on the timeline, on the Facebook timeline, I guess, with the messages about how much money is left on the table from unclaimed insurance policies, just because families didn't have a plan, or the person thought he was doing, or the persons thought they were doing good with the insurance policy and never had it filed in a place where someone could find. And I'm pretty sure there's so many other stories. Like in particular, you were talking about, I call it playing position. There's someone that knows what's going on, and they're not going to share that information because they want to make sure they have first dibs on everything that, when it comes to, to their inheritance and things like that. And selfishness could turn something, a death into something so nasty and unreal. And it's sad, when this is an opportunity, families should be able to come together, and the wishes of the person that just passed away are being honored. It's going to be separated because they were not organized. Lastly, I think the culture has to change. All right. You can't take it all with you. That's one thing. You have to, if you're disciplined enough to put money away in a policy for 20, 30 years, make sure it gets to the person that you love the right way, where it can be organized, and also where you can have other papers and things like that they're going to need to execute that that policy and everything, so they can receive it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just more than just money. It's the last wishes of the person that just passed away. It's about solidifying a plan that they had in the beginning, because if they pay into a policy for 20, 30, 40 years, they want that person to have that money. They want their family to have their money. They want it to be distributed the right way, but they just don't know. And I'm glad that this platform will be able to inform them. And Jessie, thanks for coming on tonight, because that's some real live scenarios that people are facing right now that they don't want to talk about. All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So does anyone have, I'm going to open the floor up to questions. I mean, we've covered a couple of topics, and I'd like to know if our guests that are on have any questions.
Excuse me, ma'am. I have a question.
Yes.
So what is a good, age to start working on a plan like this? Like, should it be as young as 18, 19 years old, or, mid 20s, early 30s, when people start having a family and kids? Or,
I think,
what would be a good time frame to start something?
I feel like so first of all, families need to sit down and have conversations about it, right? So if you are still at home with your parents, then you need to have a conversation with your parents about whether or not they have a life insurance policy for you and themselves, or even a funeral policy for you and themselves, right? And then as you get older, once you leave home, if there's a policy in place, that's fine. But you still need to leave instructions of, okay, if something happens to me, I mean, it should always be a discussion. In my opinion, it should be a discussion. As families, if you're single, it's the same scenario. So in my view, there's not an age limit as to when you should, have these discussions. And as a matter of fact, I believe, and I was talking to someone today, that the best time to get insurance policies is when a child is born, right? I mean, it's inexpensive for you to get an insurance policy when a child is born. And you don't get it because you're expecting that child to die anytime soon. You get it, for the just in case or the what ifs, and it's cheaper then. So when you get them when they're first born, it's going to be less expensive over time. That policy can carry them through their entire life. The younger you are when you get an insurance policy, the better. One of the challenges too that we'll have a more in-depth discussion about is if you don't get an insurance policy, then you have to, and your child, let's say your child is diagnosed with autism or ADHD or depression or whatever, now you have just eliminated the ability for that child to get a policy. And it doesn't matter how old they are, they're not going to get insured. If once they're diagnosed, so it's not just a physical thing anymore. And they don't insurance companies, they don't just distinguish the difference between an autistic child and someone who's depressed. Like a mental disorder is a mental disorder.
Follow question, since we're talking about like health conditions and stuff of children. So in particular circumstances, like what if the child is diagnosed at birth with a particular disease like sickle cell anemia, or like something that's more likely to be discovered like once the child is born, before you've even had a chance to talk to
an insurance company?
Yeah, insurance stuff. Like, you find out within like that week, those first 3 or 4 days of the baby's life. You know what I'm saying?
So that question I couldn't answer, but I could look into it, right? But I'm assuming that you could still get insurance for that child, but you may have to wait a period of time to see how they're progressing, see what type of medications they're on, because I mean, they're going to look at all of that stuff, right? So I can't say specifically, what that entails, but I do understand the insurance process, and I know that, any type of situation where it's going to be a risk to the insurance company, they're going to scrutinize that. Like, it's going to be very, they're going to scrutinize it. And it doesn't matter how old the child is. Now, the chance for recovery, because the child is young from some diseases or from some disorders, like autism, right? So you could have a child that's diagnosed with autism, but they could, well, even so, even if they're high functioning, it's still kind of, you can't. Yeah, you can't. Yeah. Now they'll be able to function and stuff, but insurance wise, they won't touch them, which is very unfortunate for those families.
Something like that, like a child with autism, most times, like, the parents won't know until they're like 3 or 4. So if they got like an insurance policy prior to the diagnosis of autism, they'd be good. So like, but for something like Down syndrome, in most cases, like Down syndrome, like once the baby is born, you can tell whether or not the child has Down syndrome. So that's like something that the doctor would probably diagnose the baby with something like that, like at least within the first couple of weeks.
And so with Down syndrome, though, it's not just a mental thing, right? They generally tend to have other conditions, underlying medical conditions, when you have someone with Down syndrome. So that's automatically. But yeah, I was just kind of shocked because, our son, he's autistic and he's nonverbal. However, he's like as healthy as a horse. So I was very disappointed in the fact that I could not get insurance for him because he's healthy. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. His health, he's in perfect health, very little drug use, drug medications and things like that is what I'm saying. Not drug use, not illegal drugs, but very little medications. He eats healthy. He's lean. He's not overweight. Doesn't matter. He's got autism. And they're like, nope, sorry.
Seems like they basically just view people like that as a liability.
They review them as a liability. Insurance policies don't look at people as people. Insurance policies look at them as an asset or a liability. So they're looking at how long you're going to be paying into that policy, what are the risk factors and all of that stuff before they insure you, which is how they come up with your premium. So the older you are, the higher your premium is going to be and the less money you can get for insurance. So the next best thing than an insurance policy would be a funeral insurance policy where they don't draw blood or anything like that. They just give you a policy, $10,000 or $15,000 to cover the funeral. You select everything that you want, from flowers to obituaries and stuff. And I encourage people to even write the obituary how they want to be remembered, because that in itself is also a stressful thing where, I've had to write my dad's obituary, and even that can cause drama. Like there was drama at my dad's funeral for how the obituary was written, because you had some family members that didn't like other family members, and they didn't want those family members mentioned in the obituary. But my dad didn't care that they didn't like each other. He loved them all. So if I'm going to honor him, I'm going to put them all in the obituary. So that created a rift. I mean, just the smallest things that when people are alive don't matter, you just kind of get over it or whatever. You can have your beef with somebody, but as long as they're not interfering with your relationship with your parent or whatever, it's fine. But as soon as that person dies, it's a whole new ball game. People are fighting, cussing you out, getting threats. I mean, all of that. I don't know, Jessie, did you get threats? I got threats.
I got threats. There was a lot of just disconnection altogether, where I just no longer existed in people's lives for a long time.
Yeah.
And some of those rifts are healed and some of them aren't. Some of them never can be, even if you're back together with those people. Like the things that are said and done in those time periods can just really cause havoc and do damage.
Yeah.
And I don't see who asked that question about the insurance and when to start planning. But the other thing is when you're young, like Rydia said, in your teens, in your 20s, the other insurance that you have available is long-term care. In case that you are sick and you live a long time, your premiums on long-term care insurance is so much less when you're younger. I got a life insurance policy when I was in my mid-20s, and it's a long-term policy. I still only pay $21 a month for a $250,000 worth of coverage because I was young and I was healthy and I passed everything with flying colors. And if you can manage to, give up 3 coffees, out and about, that's pretty much what $25 a month is. And, it's going to cover you in the long term. And just when you're younger is really when to start planning. As soon as you own something that's yours and that you want to protect it, do so.
Absolutely. I'm in total agreement with that. And when you mentioned the long-term insurance policies, I just thought about, I just posted a not so fun fact, right? Which is that if your family, because everyone pays into Social Security. And so when they start collecting Social Security and they get Medicare and Medicaid, and it's like, yeah, I paid into this, I'm covered for long-term insurance. Let me tell you, what Medicare and Medicaid will cover for long-term insurance don't look so great. Not only that, But once you pass away, if you had any assets that you wanted to leave to your children or grandchildren, government's coming for that, because they're like, hey, we just paid for your long-term care for umpteen years and stuff. We're going to get our money back. So if there's anything in your name, when after after everything's said and done and you die and you've been in long-term health care for X amount of years, you are going to, like, your family is going to have a struggle, and they may think they're getting this house. Next thing you know, government's like, nope, this is in her name. This belongs to us. And that's what we do when we sign up for Medicaid and Medicare and we use those services, is that it's almost like doing a reverse mortgage. Like, you see the money now, but when you're gone, it belongs to the government. So, yeah, again, something that no one's going to tell you.
And they'll make you use up your money. They'll let you keep your home if you're in a nursing home, but they'll take it later. But before they'll even pay for your, $3,000 a month in a nursing home, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
They expect you to have less than $2,000 assets in your name. So, like, if you want to bring, if you want somebody to bring you a nice meal at the nursing home, you can't even pay for that.
Right.
Because you're not allowed to have that. And there's ways around that. Obviously, Randy and I have talked about some of those. There's ways around that. But you have to know that and have those plans in place before you get to the point where you need a nursing home. Because once you need it and you need it right away, it's too late.
And I'll be honest with you, like, as a military veteran, if I had known, I wanted to get long-term. Once I started finding all this stuff out, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to have long-term health care insurance. We need to have that. And yeah, nope, not going to get it. Not going to get it.
The policy I got in my 20s only cost me $1,200 a year.
Yeah, that's awesome,
Yeah.
And
you have to know that to get it.
Family talked about it. So you're like one in probably 10 million. You know what I mean? Because your family was very well, and even so, there was still some things that were not taken care of, even though they were very, vocal about, what they wanted. There was still some unknowns out there that, you weren't even aware of until they were gone. So, I guess this is everything that we are going to talk about, that that I want to talk about tonight. We have discussed. And so, is there anyone else that has any questions or comments? I see that there are some posts about who needs long-term care. Thank you for adding that, Robert, and also long-term care insurance 101. So he did post some references for you to use if you want to do some more research on long-term health care, on unclaimed money, and how to find out if there's something out there for you or for your family. Just note that if there was nothing in place and there's something out there, more than likely you're going to have to open an estate, and that's going to cost money, and you're going to endure that cost. So again, it's just really important for people to just take the time out and think about it. And you don't have to do it all in one sitting. You can just, over time, just find, like, a young lady I talked to last week or the week before last. She just has a book, and she just is like jotting stuff down, and she has a whole crate, divided, like insurance policies and, things like that. And I do the same, but we also have like a flash drive and stuff like that. So our stuff is organized. But I can't wait to have my own stuff, running, plan the course up and running, because it's definitely needed, even for me.
You have yours in a go box because you live in hurricane country too. So sometimes you have to have that in a go box.
That's right.
So you have to have it organized, and that's the one thing, no matter what, if you're going to grab something when you're running out of the house, you grab
that box. Yep. Or you keep copies in a safe deposit box. That's a whole other discussion,
Yeah.
Temporarily, well, not even temporarily. I mean, there's just so many different things. I mean, we could talk about it all day. And we've covered a variety of subjects just tonight, Medicare, Medicaid, and how the government's going to take those assets and, unclaimed money. And we talk about long-term care, and we talked about your experience, with those different entities and like closing out estates, and just, even though your family was very vocal about, planning for, when they pass away, it still didn't cover everything. So I want to thank everyone for taking the time to watch this Facebook Live tonight and joining me. I thank you for your questions. Jessie, once again, thank you very much for taking the time to share. We will be talking some more because I really appreciate your experiences. It helps me, expand my views and kind of see where I can fill in some more gaps. So I'm really looking forward to working on, some of those things, and us, working together and collaborating on that. Thank you, Robert, for posting links as we were talking today. And I pray that everyone has a wonderful week. Next week, our episode 3, I am working on 2 different things, inviting someone who actually does the funeral policies on, or I will have a friend of mine on that, does financial planning and stuff. So I'm just, every week we're going to have a different topic that, people need to really think about. So I'm excited. Oh, I'm also working on having an actual funeral director come in and have a conversation with us about what that looks like. And I'll be sharing a video that I found in my research that kind of gives you that behind the scenes look at what's really going on when you go to a funeral home to plan for your loved one's homegoing. So thanks everyone again. God bless you all, and I hope to see you next week. Oh, and you'll hear from me some more because I'm actually going to, again, launch that website this week, hopefully by Friday. So thank you very much, and you guys have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.